Hello and welcome to 18 WJTS Inform. I'm your host, Bill Potter. We're going to find out about Springs Valley Bank and Trust Company, SVB&T as many people know it. They're celebrating 120 years. Joining us in the studio is Jamie Shinabarger. He is the president of Springs Valley Bank and Trust. And 120 years, Jamie, that's a long time for a bank to be still its own bank.
Well, it's a nice testimony to doing things the right way, and longevity always says something about the organization in terms of you're doing the fundamentals and you have to reinvent yourself. Successful companies have to reinvent themselves. We talk about our founder, Mr. Habig, how successful would Kimball be if they were still building wooden TV cabinets today, right, for example.
Right, exactly. Well, let's talk a little bit about that 120 years.
Yeah.
How did the bank, Springs Valley Bank and Trust, get started?
Well, I think Mr. Habig saw the benefit of having a bank as part of his operation as he was growing the Kimball organization. So he bought the West Baden National Bank and the French Lick State Bank in the early to mid-50s and merged them in about 58 to become the foundation of the bank.
Okay, and it continues today. Tell us a little bit about the makeup, the administration, the board of the bank, because I think some of the Habigs are still involved, which is amazing.
Two of the sons of founder Arnold Habig are on the board. Doug Habig is chairman of the board, and John Habig is a board member, as well as a core group of folks that were originally part of the Kimball organization. Ron Tin is a member. Pete Sermersheim was a board member until he moved out of the area, but his father was part of the original Kimball group. And other folks that have been with the organization for more than a couple decades. J.C. Tucker, board member, and a host of others, newer folks that have been added.
Now, you just recently renovated the main office,
right,
on 6th Street. And I was at that opening, a beautiful facility, but it kind of reflects the change in banking. We talked a little bit about there's not as much teller space. Why is that?
Well, I mean, as banking has gone on, especially in the last 10 years, digital banking has taken over the space, and that includes phone. A lot of stuff is done on phone, of course, PC, computers at home, but the old first floor used to be comprised of probably 80% lobby space, and now it's probably 20% under the new model. And then, of course, drive-up traffic used to be heavily on paydays. It would be the lines and all that, and now draw a lot of direct deposits. There still is some folks that like the personal touch, like to interact with people, and they might come in the branch or use the drive-up. But it's greatly changed the way we go about doing business. A lot of folks, younger generation especially, less and less interaction with personnel and more electronics.
Yeah, but for the older folks, you still offer that for those. There's somebody you can come in, a face you can talk to. You can go through the drive-thru that way. And those that are younger that like convenience, it amazes me. I guess I could write you a check and you can take a picture of it with your phone and it gets deposited into your account. Isn't that kind of what happens nowadays?
And so that's bridged the mile, the whole factor of miles and distance to branch has changed, because if you're not doing a cash business, you can really function largely at a distance. And even if you move from this area to another area, you can keep the bank because you have the ability to still deposit checks. And so yes, it's changed the way we operate in a pretty drastic way. And for banks that have big branch networks, many of them are trying to pare down, especially the lower volume locations, because of the tough part of overhead expense. And so the digital has really stepped in for some of that.
Let's talk a little bit about the footprint. Of course, when the bank first started, it was in the valley, and that was small. Now you're getting bigger. As 120 years you celebrate, you're bigger, and you've opened 2 new branches. Talk about the footprint of Springs Valley Bank and Trust.
Well, the charter still resides in Orange County at our French Lick branch, but and that's been largely the presence of the bank. But in the mid '80s, Mr. Habig put a location where it is here in Jasper on 231, where the flags, of course, are the distinguishing factor for the location. But we've made a commitment to sort of stay in the rural county seat type markets. So we have a location in Paoli, one in French Lick, two in Jasper, and our two newest are Princeton in Gibson County and Washington in Daviess County.
So you're expanding out. Why do you want to keep expanding? You want to get bigger and bigger?
Well,
so 240 years from now, when you and I are around, it'll be huge.
Well, the size, I mean, scale does have some benefits, but we also realize it comes with some negatives too. As you get bigger, it's tougher to control your operation. It's tougher to be personal. We really pride ourselves on on relationship banking you talked about. Yes, we offer the electronic options, but we also offer a lot of hands-on, especially with things that are more complicated or require more consultation, like mortgages, for example. So people can come in and talk about that, or commercial lending. All our commercial lenders, most of our commercial customers have the cell phone of their commercial lender, so they can text them or call them on a Saturday at 8 o'clock, and hopefully our folks respond in a good way. But so accessibility, it's not 9 to 4 like it used to be. It's really 24/7. People expect to email you, text you, call you. So that accessibility is something that we like to provide, and we think that the relationship part, while size has its benefits, there are also benefits to controlling our size and to be able to not outgrow that personal touch that people have come to get used to and appreciate.
Now we know banks hold our money and lend money out. What are the services that Springs Valley Bank and Trust? You mentioned, commercial mortgages. What are many of them?
Commercial banking is a lot of what we do. Have a lot of commercial real estate. About 25% of our $400 million loan portfolio is agriculture. So ag is a big part of what we do. E-banking, treasury management, Vicki Englert and other folks are in those areas that can help along those lines. We used to do more exotic things like foreign currency and some of those things, but that was really a one-off from the Kimball needs. And now that the affiliation with Kimball as time grew, the Kimball basically outgrew the bank, and so and now as the Kimball has reorganized to split the company and created the two divisions, and then no real family is part of management anymore. So our affiliation has really changed over the years, but I mean we still have a good core base of Kimball folks, but we really, in 2012, we rebranded really to send the message, hey, we're not just the Kimball Credit Union. That was sort of the mentality I think people had about Springs Valley. And that's when we really started to make inroads with a larger following and better traction in the western markets, which would be Dubois County and Daviess and Gibson.
So they can stop at any branch location. Can you still do something as simple as buy a certificate of deposit? Do those sorts of things still exist?
Yeah, they do. And during these times of low rates, another thing that sort of became popular was fixed annuities, which was part of the brokerage, which is also part of financial advisory group. We have a large financial advisory group division. That's something we didn't really talk about much, but our formerly called Trust, but now we sort of rebranded that to Financial Advisory. But it's estate planning and wealth management, and can do real estate for tax purposes, tax exchanges, and different functions like that, estate planning and so forth. So those those are all helpful things. But yes, it can be as simple as a CD, or it could be something more complex, which is estate planning.
So Springs Valley Bank and Trust is somebody that you can trust and go in there and visit. And you are a bank. At one time, was it a credit union? Or
No,
it never was.
no.
Just people thought that because of the association. It never was.
At one time, we had a national bank charter in our history back in the 50s at one time, but we ended up, now we're state chartered. So our state regulator is the Indiana Department of Financial Institutions. Our federal regulator is FDIC, and our holding company is regulated by the Federal Reserve of St. Louis. So we have a number of folks that we're accountable to, but at the same time, we've really grown. I think we've grown our relationships not only with customers, but with those that oversee us and respect-wise in terms of what we provide, and we've grown capital. I talk all the time to our staff about we have to be relevant. That's our best path forward in terms of independence of the bank, as we talked about. For the bank to be independent for 120 years, quite an achievement. So how do we continue that? Well, we continue to be relevant for customers. We continue to be relevant for the communities that we're in terms of how much we contribute and support the communities. Of course, the employees, because they make everything work, and then the shareholder, though. This money that we're loaning is and dealing with on a deposit base is really the shareholder. So we have to be responsible to them too.
Well, you are doing something right to have gone 120 years, Springs Valley Bank and Trust. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, anything else you'd like to add?
Just that we are a bank. The bank stock does trade on OTCQX, and we recently split the stock early in March. I think it's trading at $49.05 or somewhere thereabouts. We also did just make the American Banker top 200 community banks, less than $2 billion, publicly traded. That group, we were number 132 on the list with a 3-year average return on equity of 11.05%. So we've done that 4 consecutive years. We've only been on the OTCQX exchange since middle of 2018. That was a move to try to give shareholders some liquidity, recognizing that as we prepare for change in leadership in bank, et cetera, we also need to think about how do we continue to address the needs of shareholders and create a new generation of shareholder.
Well, obviously, then you have growth, but you're still keeping your roots.
Yep.
Okay. Springs Valley Bank and Trust, 120 years. Jamie Shinabarger, the president of Springs Valley Bank and Trust, thank you for being our guest.
Hey, thank you, Bill.
And thank you for watching 18 WJTS. We are local people watching local people.